Paul worked late into the night, lit only by the cold blue glow of his dual monitors and the occasional flicker of passing headlights outside his apartment window. The contract had been long and dull, scrubbing ancient directories left over from a now-defunct defense subcontractor that had apparently once dabbled in experimental computation. The file system was a graveyard of forgotten ambitions. Redacted PDFs, corrupted video streams, machine learning experiments with no training data, and one folder named simply Obscura. Inside it, just one file. No extension, no documentation. Its name was master.pc. He opened it. The editor rendered it as a wall of characters, dense, almost organic. Lines of alphanumerics, nonsensical at first glance, but spaced in a way that didn't quite feel random. It reminded him of DNA sequences, some kind of mapping maybe, a key to what? Paul scrolled. Line after line passed, without meaning until something caught his eye near the bottom. His name. Not just Paul, but Paul Henry Rock, the full legal version, perfectly spelled and nested inside a block of otherwise unreadable code. He blinked, scrolled back. There it was again, indented, framed by a surrounding syntax that made no sense, symbols that didn't match any language or encoding format he knew. His name was followed by a block of values like variables, height, weight, blood type, age. Even things no digital system should know. Childhood allergies, a fracture he got in 7th grade, the name of his first pet. He leaned back in his chair, goosebumps. This wasn't a database, it was something else, something personal. Just to test it, he selected one of the variables, M. His hands hovered. He wasn't sure why he chose that one, maybe because it seemed the safest to toggle without triggering a financial flag or crashing the OS. He deleted M and typed F. Then he saved. The file flickered briefly, just a momentary blink of the cursor. Nothing dramatic, no fanfare, no error message. Paul waited, but nothing happened. He chuckled under his breath, shook his head. Whatever this was, it had either broken or was nonsense. He brushed his teeth and went to bed a few minutes later, still thinking about how strange it all was. It started small. Paul turned in his sleep, one arm sliding beneath his pillow. The fabric of his t-shirt caught on his shoulder. He stirred again, restless. His breathing slowed, then subtly shifted in pitch. The shape of his neck thinned, slimmer, gently tapered as cartilage softened. A slight crackle beneath the skin, as vocal cords shortened by imperceptible millimeters. Muscle mass redistributed under the skin. Deltoids softened. Biceps narrowed slightly. The dense bulk of his chest shifting downward into budding weight. His breath hitched just once as if his body noticed, deep inside, that something was changing. His ribcage narrowed by fractions. The subtle taper of a waist emerged. Bones bending under a silent command. Fat deposited slowly along his thighs and hips, creeping outward with invisible insistence. His heart beat steadily, unalarmed. The first real sensation hit. His chest tingled. Not in a painful way, more like pins and needles, as if he'd pressed against something for too long. The skin itched faintly, stretched tight in unfamiliar tension. Underneath the cotton of his shirt, his nipples had enlarged, darkened slightly, pressing forward as glandular tissue formed beneath. Breast tissue swelled with relentless calm. A heaviness pulled slowly across his chest, as if gravity had claimed a new hold. Areola widened. His shirt, loose the night before, grew taut across his torso. He shifted again, muttered something incomprehensible in his sleep, and hugged his pillow tighter. The sensation rippled downward. Pelvic bones subtly rotated, tilting outward. The curvature of his spine adjusted to compensate. His center of gravity shifted, so slight that only an accelerometer might notice. Muscles in his lower back relaxed, repatterned themselves. His abdomen flattened. Internal structures reorganized not abruptly, but gradually, as though following an instruction set written in the language of biology itself. His body had adopted a new rhythm. The hormonal symphony that had once played testosterone's steady drumbeat had been retuned. Estrogen took the lead, softening the skin's texture, adding roundness to the cheeks, altering fat distribution around the thighs and buttocks. Hair grew longer, dark strands pooling slightly against the pillowcase. Even beneath the blanket, the form was unmistakably shifting. Boxer briefs, which had once hung loosely, now felt awkward, misaligned with his changing frame. His breathing had taken on a slightly different cadence, shorter lungs, smaller trachea. Yet through it all, Paul slept. When morning came, the sun filtered through slatted blinds, laying lines of soft gold across her cheek. The light woke her slowly. She rubbed at her eyes, groggy and sluggish from restless dreams. Her limbs felt heavy off balance. Her shirt clung to her chest in a way it never had before. She scrambled out of bed and nearly tripped due to her balance being off. Her legs felt longer, her hips wider. The boxer briefs dug into the wrong places. Her thighs brushed against each other. Her shirt barely reached past her waist, stretched tightly across her chest, and riding high where her belly used to be flat and undefined. She went into the bathroom to brush her teeth when she realized her reflection was different. She looked at the mirror. The person staring back was beautiful. Not doll-like or alien, just undeniably feminine. Strong cheekbones, softened with roundness. Full lips parted in astonishment. A narrow, delicate neck framed by hair that now fell just below the shoulders in dark waves. Her jaw had slimmed. Her brow no longer jutted quite so prominently. But the eyes, they were still Paul's. Same weariness, same stubborn line of thought behind them. She raised a trembling hand to her chest. Her fingers met softness. Warm, pliant, real. Her breasts moved when she touched them, not implants, not padding. They were part of her. They were real. Real, large, heavy, and full. Her skin was smoother, warmer, unfamiliar beneath her own palm. She pinched a nipple experimentally and unexpectedly moaned and stepped back in disbelief as the sensation registered. There was no delay, no illusion. Every nerve was mapped. Her breath hitched. She rushed back to her desk, flung herself into the chair, and opened the file. Master. PC loaded instantly. She scrolled frantically looking for that line. It was still there, but different. Paul Henry Rock F957141998. Last night it had been Paul Henry Rock M737141998. She figured the letter must indicate some kind of gender or sex marker, and the number after that was chest size, possibly centimeters. She looked around the room. Nothing else had changed. Her apartment was still the same. Her desk, the same clutter. Her keyboard, her monitors, her crumpled hoodie on the floor. Everything else was intact. Only she had changed. Paul sat frozen, her hand resting lightly against her chest as if trying to anchor herself to the sensation. It was real, every part of it. Not a dream, not a hallucination. She hadn't just transformed, she had been rewritten from the marrow out. And the file had done it with the casual authority of a god rewriting a line of scripture. Paul leaned in slowly, fingers hovering over the keyboard again as a quiet, dangerous thought began to form. What else could she change? It started as curiosity, a test, just to see what would happen. Paul sat in front of the computer late one night, the room bathed in warm amber light from the desk lamp. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, heart thudding, pulse in her ears. The line of code blinked at her. Paul Henry Rock F95. Backspace. She replaced the value. Paul Henry Rock F130. She paused, took a breath, hit save. Her body shifted almost instantly. It wasn't painful, just startling, like a slow exhale that never ended. Her back pressed harder against the chair. The weight settled across her chest like sandbags wrapped in silk. She looked down and blinked. The swell of her breasts now dominated her field of view, rising like two soft hills beneath her shirt, stretching the cotton so tight that it barely held shape. Paul leaned forward and gasped. The new size pulled at her spine, her balance, her awareness of space. Her arms had to arc wider now just to reach the keyboard. Her cleavage was deep, pronounced, unavoidable. She twisted slightly in her chair, experimenting with movement. The sensation was absurd, heavy and warm and real. She stared down at herself, both amazed and a little aroused. She smiled. She looked further around her name and found the number she was looking for. $83.95, the amount that she had left in her bank account. She deleted the decimal point and changed it to 8,395.00. She pulled out her phone. Sure enough, her banking app displayed $8,395 in it. Over the next few days, she discovered even more she could do with the file. She went back to a more reasonable 80 centimeters. She could program code into subroutines. She also found that geographic information was also encoded in a long number that changed when she moved. It even had altitude above sea level, even had a time location. Paul wondered if she changed that, if she'd be able to time travel. A sudden knock came at the door. Paul opened the door slowly, careful to control her expression. Two men stood in the hallway. Both were dressed in plain clothes, button-downs, slacks, jackets that didn't quite hide the shoulder bulges of holstered sidearms. One held a thin folder, the other held nothing but kept scanning her apartment number, the hallway, her eyes. "Sorry," Paul said, smiling politely. "Can I help you?" The man with the folder nodded. "Apologies for the unannounced visit, ma'am. We're with the bureau." He flipped the folder open just enough to flash the seal. "Looking for a Paul Rock. We believe this is his listed residence." Paul kept her smile, fighting the instinct to glance over her shoulder. "Oh, no, he's not here." The agent tilted his head. "You know him?" She hesitated. "Yeah, he's my boyfriend." It came out easy, believable, close enough to the truth that her brain didn't lock up. The agent who hadn't spoken took a half step forward. "Do you know where he is?" She gave a practiced shrug. "I haven't seen him since yesterday. He works crazy hours." The agent with a folder nodded slowly, eyes scanning her face. "Do you mind if we ask you a couple questions?" "It's nothing formal. Just something came up." Paul nodded, and they stepped inside. She offered them coffee. They declined. "We noticed a sequence of flagged financial activity tied to a few accounts associated with Paul's social." "It's not criminal yet," the folder man said, "but it's unusual." "How so?" the other one answered. "Clean accounts suddenly activating. Large deposits with no source trail, then disappearing. All technically legal, but odd." Paul faked a laugh. "That sounds like him. He was trying crypto mining or something. You ever notice any strange software on his machines?" "No," she lied. "He's always been kind of paranoid about security. I couldn't log into anything of his if I tried." They didn't laugh. Folder guy closed the file and stood. "We appreciate your time. If he gets in touch, would you give us a call?" He handed her a card. "We're not in a hurry. Just want to clear a few things up." Paul took the card. "Sure." Both men gave short nods. They stepped into the hallway, but before the door could shut, the second one turned slightly, met her eyes. "You said you're his girlfriend." Paul's throat tightened. His old landlord said he lived alone. "Just surprised, that's all. Thanks again." He smiled. Not unkind, but watchful. Then the door closed behind them. Paul didn't move for nearly a full minute. She waited, counted the seconds, heard the elevator ding. Only then did she exhale. Her knees were shaking, her pulse loud in her ears. They'd bought the story, but only barely. They didn't know who she was, but they knew something wasn't right. Her apartment, her presence, her voice, something had landed in their memory, like a pebble in a shoe. Annoying. Unexplained. Not a reason to act, but enough to follow up later. She paced back to the desk, heart still hammering, hands trembling as she clicked open the file. They had seen her face. They had her address. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't assume they'd stop asking questions. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next week. But they'd come back. Someone would. She needed an exit strategy. Something clean. Undeniable. Untraceable. The agents had knocked on her door because they were sniffing around Paul Rock. But that person didn't exist anymore. Not on paper. Not in this body. And if they started connecting dots, she couldn't just keep shifting locations. The file wasn't a mask. It was a tool. And the world had already noticed her using it. There was no future for her in 2025. But maybe she didn't need the future. She grabbed a backpack from the closet, yanked open drawers, started shoving things inside. Flashlight. protein bars, matches, refillable water bottle.
Stuff like that.
If she needed something, she could just pop back into the time she left and pick it up. It wasn't enough. It wouldn't be enough for long. But she wasn't going to survive on gadgets. She just needed to be gone. Gone and forgotten. She sat back down at the terminal, fingers shaking with urgency. She erased the existing coordinate line and replaced it. Geo_coordinates 37.75 2014.9934 miles, 2000 Central Sicily, 2000 BC, and hit save. Everything was quiet for a beat. Then she blinked, and the world was gone. The hum of her desk fan, the glow of the monitor, the apartment's dry recycled air, all gone. She was crouched, knees in dirt, backpack still slung over her shoulder. The air was thicker here, raw and damp and real. Wind pushed through tall grass. The sun was lower, more golden, and birds overhead didn't sound like anything in her memory. Before her stretched wild hills. No houses, no cars, just forests. Stone. The edge of a distant river flashing under sunlight. She turned and saw a cave mouth behind her, dark, cool, empty. Her pulse slowed. Before she had left, she had set up a subroutine to make things easier. No hunger, no sickness, no aging, nothing supernatural, just numbers cranked high enough or frozen outright. Biological maintenance, without need for input. A body that could keep going as long as time itself. No death. At least, not from the usual things. She didn't expect to feel different, and she didn't, not really. But she knew something had changed. There was a lightness in her limbs. A strange clarity in her vision. A perfect stillness in her breathing. Her stomach didn't grumble. Her throat wasn't dry. Even after the exertion of the jump, of dragging herself through prehistory, her muscles didn't ache. She was stable. She was safe. She stepped forward, savoring the way her feet pressed into the earth. This would be her home now. Her domain. No money. No governments. No file-sharing networks or court orders or surveillance tools. No agents. Just space.
Time.
Nature. Then she heard a grunt.
Low. Wet. Human.
She froze. It came from the tree line about 50 feet downslope. The rustling of brush. The uneven thud of bare feet over root-covered ground.
Paul's eyes widened.
Her hand drifted toward the hilt of the camping knife she'd tucked into her side. The figure emerged slowly, pushing through low brush. He was hunched, broad-shouldered, covered in dirt and animal hides. His hair was a tangled mass. His eyes deep-set beneath a thick brow. A sharpened branch rested in his hand, roughly whittled, more club than spear. A caveman. He stopped when he saw her, blinking hard, nostrils flaring. They stared at each other in silence.
Paul's thoughts raced.
She hadn't accounted for others. She'd assumed isolation, that she'd arrive in an empty valley, untouched and unclaimed. But this era wasn't empty. Civilization hadn't begun, but people existed. Primitive. Curious. Dangerous. Paul barely had time to turn before the club came down. A blunt, ugly crack, the sound of plastic and glass shattering. Her phone, tucked in her back pocket, caught the full swing. It exploded in a burst of fragments against the side of her thigh. She yelped, half from pain, half from shock, stumbling forward as the caveman surged from the shadows with a roar that echoed against the valley walls. She spun, reaching for the knife, but it wasn't there. Her eyes darted to the ground. The knife lay in her pack, unopened. She had been so careful, so focused on the code, the exit plan, the theory of it all, that she'd forgotten to arm herself before stepping into prehistory. She turned to run, but he was already behind her. She hadn't thought to increase her speed or her strength. She was just a woman now, slightly athletic, sure, but nothing that could outpace a desperate wild hunter, born into a world of pure survival. A thick arm wrapped around her middle. Her feet left the ground. Her scream came out of sweat and dirt and raw earth overwhelming her senses. She kicked, twisted, elbowed, nothing. He barely flinched. Her stomach dropped. Her limbs thrashed. But it was too late. He carried her like a caught deer, feet swinging uselessly, her backpack slipping from her shoulder and thudding into the mossy dirt behind them. The fading sunlight blinked in and out through trees as they passed, branches tearing at her sleeves, her scalp scraped by bark. She tried to focus, try to think. No phone, no backup, no way to open the file. She was locked in her current parameters, normal speed, normal strength, immortal body, which meant she couldn't die, but she could still feel everything. The caveman didn't speak, just grunted, growled, dragged her deeper into the forest until the shadows swallowed the landscape and the rock walls opened up. Before them, a jagged mouth of a cave, dark and waiting. He ducked inside, her body swinging in his arms like she weighed nothing. She felt the coolness of the cave, immediately damp air against her skin, the echo of their footsteps shifting from forest hush to underground resonance. Deeper and deeper, he carried her until the sunlight was just a pale glow behind them. Then he stopped. He dropped her roughly onto a mound of animal hide, soft and rank and earthy. She scrambled up, trying to back away, but her limbs shook with adrenaline. Her back hit cold stone. The caveman stared, not with violence exactly, but with intent, with curiosity, with primitive logic grinding behind ancient eyes. She knew what he wanted. She also knew she couldn't outfight him, couldn't outrun him.
Not now.
Not in this body. Not in this state. Paul sucked in a breath, forcing her mind to sharpen through the rising terror. She still had one advantage: time. She couldn't die, couldn't starve, couldn't be broken permanently. She would endure this moment, and then she would find a way to reach the file again if it still existed, if she could recover the pack, rebuild the tech, anything. And next time she'd program more than a soft exit and slow chest growth. She'd program fighting muscle, speed, fire, command. But for now, she was trapped in a body she'd built to be beautiful, not battle-ready. And the caveman was watching her like she was a gift from the gods.